But yeah, my story. I'm a grateful recovering alcoholic. Yeah, my drinking started early as a teenager, but really got bad, during college. My college time away, and I drank when I first started drinking. Didn't know much about alcohol, but the fact that my father was an alcoholic, so I saw him drink. But even as a young age, I really didn't understand it and understand that it was a disease and an addiction, drinking. So, I saw my father battle with it, and as a teenager growing up, I started drinking here and there, but it really started affecting me. Once I got to college, and when I got into college, I started to drink basically just to, be able to talk to people, to, you know, m- defeat my shyness, I guess you could say. So I wasn't shy anymore. And that just drinking gave me a reason to speak to people, or gave me a way to speak to people, you know, come out of my shell and, just, hang out with everybody. Then it started to take effect, once I graduated, got into the corporate world, the drinking just started getting worse. Went through a divorce, got back with my wife, separated again, two times, and then you know, numerous DUIs, stints in rehab, and I think what really, I'm just summarizing my story now, but what really, you know, was I guess they say bottom for me. What really opened my eyes was when my aunt died of this
Mm.
disease, and that was the day. That next day when she passed away, I went right to rehab, and you know, that's when I went on my path to recovery.
Yeah, man, we got a few things in common there, man. I mean, I'm also in recovery, so I know that the challenges that come with you know getting sober, and especially in the beginning. And I want to know. I'm curious, like, what was some of the limited beliefs and fears that you had to move through in order to get sober? Because I remember, man, the challenge of waking up and trying to live life without doing drugs, that alone
Yeah.
was something challenging to me. So I'm curious, through your journey, what was a limited belief that you had to go through, or fear that you had to crack and overcome?
Well, that's a great question, and yeah, so many limiting beliefs. One, we as men, especially men of color, it's like we just think we it's not so easy to admit to ourselves, not to others, but to even ourselves that we have a problem, right? I grew up in a household where you don't whine, you don't cry, you don't complain. Something's
Yeah.
wrong, just deal with it. And you know, to a certain extent, of course, you overcome things. But when it comes to something like an addiction, it's not as easy as just saying get over it. But I didn't know that. So when I started having this issue, when I started to realize I had a problem with alcohol, I didn't seek help. And I thought that I had to get over this myself because no one could help me.
Mm.
So that kept me from getting help, asking out, reaching out. And I mean, one thing that stopped me from getting better at first was that, I thought I had to do it by myself. There was no one out there who was going to help me, or I also thought if I told anybody, especially my wife, that she would think of me as a weak man, or how could I raise my children if I'm over here, you know, admitting that I have an addiction and getting help for it. So that's what really stopped me from, in the beginning, especially in early sobrieties or early, addiction, excuse me, from getting the help I needed because, I felt like, hey, you didn't even want to admit, I didn't even want to admit that I had a problem, you know?
Yeah, that asking for help. Yes, men really do struggle with that, and you hit it on the button with growing up, and not being able to cry, not being able to kind of really ask for help. It was something that
Right.
growing up, it wasn't cool to ask for help, right? It was supposedly looked at as we're weak if we ask for help.
Right.
So
Exactly.
what did you do to overcome that? What was the turning point? I know you spoke a little bit about your aunt. I'd like to dive into what was it that really said, you know what, fuck, man, enough is enough. I gotta get help. I gotta go against everything that I was brought up. How it makes me look weak if I ask for help. So how did you become strong enough to ask for help?
So I went through stages in my sobriety. So again, there's a point up in the beginning. I didn't even admit, I couldn't even admit that I had a problem. But as things started to happen to me, right? Like DUI. I got a DUI. I got my first DUI. My wife was 8 months pregnant, 8.5 months pregnant with our first daughter. So my wife had actually come to the courthouse, see me in handcuffs with a belly out to here. She's 8.5 months pregnant, and I'm getting the DUI. Um, but of course, it's me still not admitting I had a problem. I continued to drink, and things which just made my life more difficult and unmanageable. So as things started to happen, and I guess it was a buildup of so many things happening where I was like, okay, I finally admitted that I needed help. And when I went to get help, I went through recovery meetings, 12-step programs, AA. Still, there wasn't a commitment there yet. I was still thinking I got it, or went to a few meetings and then I was okay, or sober for a couple of months, then I think I'm okay, and then I just kept continuing to relapse. I was what you call a chronic relapser. I don't want to admit how many times I relapsed. I'd rather not, but that was just part of my process, my recovery process, and it got to the point where it was just I had no control over my life at all. Alcohol just controlled me. Each and every day I woke up and that's all I wanted to do was drink. From time I woke up to time I lay my head down at night. I just wanted to be drunk and drink all day. And I think when my aunt passed away, I was just like, this is it. I can't live like this anymore. I just watched her die and right in front of me because of this disease, her addiction with alcohol. And I was like, it's time to that hurt and that pain. And just, looking back at what the destruction behind me, that path I left, I was like, not being a good father. I've already lost my wife. We divorced, she left me twice. Not being a good son, not being a good brother, not being a good friend. So after all that hurt and pain, it was just like, enough was enough. And I was tired of being hurt and I had to change.